Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Bring in part 6 of What If the Gate appeared in Remnant. Link in the description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 16, The Fall. An unprecedented grim attack is en route to Beacon Academy and the vital festival fairgrounds. Having already overwhelmed the border defenses around Vale, thousands of Grimm swarm towards the Huntsman Academy, near which the gate from another world is located. A flying Grimm phoenix has been spotted making a beeline for the gate, its sheer size making it impervious to anything that our huntsman can throw at it. Meanwhile, the streets and skies are filled with dozens of Grimm species, many of which have never been seen before. Oh, and the Atlesian Knights are attacking us as well now. In short, Vale is doomed and we're all going to die. Lisa Lavender, signing out. Salem, the immortal enemy of humanity, master of the Grimm and Ozpin's greatest foe in the Shadow War, looked over the once peaceful city of Vale. She watched as the sky darkened and erupted into violent storms, lightning, and thunder shattering the air. She watched as unnatural storm clouds and great swarms of Grimm flyers blotted out the sun. She watched as the might of the Atlesian army turned upon their creators. She watched as the huntsmen and the soldiers fell to an endless onslaught of nightmares and robots. As her forces relentlessly pushed forward into Beacon, Salem found her attention drawn to Beacon Tower. At its top, a very familiar presence, as ancient as she was, awaited her arrival. The ground shifted beneath her as the Grimm Phoenix felt her will. Black flames burning with dark light, it let out an ear-piercing screech and dived. Dropping even the general's flagship, which was now firmly under her control, the Phoenix soared uncontested towards the CCT where Ozpin had made his office. It left wisps of shadow in its wake, which slowly drifted to the ground. They took shape upon reaching solid land, transforming into Beowulfs and other Grimm creatures. Salem smiled as she rode her creation straight towards Ozpin. He would die today. Beacon Academy would fall. The secrets of the gate would be hers. Ms. Company Lotta, please follow me, Winter said. Despite her previous performance, she seemed barely winded as she ushered the princess and the other Falmart girls away. Behind the group, Ariel had Heaven's Gate in her hand, now in a bow form. She was rapidly firing glowing arrows from the bow, striking down any Grimm that got too close. What's going on? Pina demanded. We are under attack, Winter bluntly replied. You must return to Falmart at once. The negotiations, Pina was cut off by a griffin landing next to her, both it and the golden arrow lodged in its neck disintegrating. Move, Ariel bellowed. Too dangerous. We'll figure it out later, Winter said. Wielding Adele Bloom, she created a row of glyphs, leading the group directly to a waiting Atlesian airship. Pina took one step into the glyphs and found herself rocketing forward, with Bozes, Tuca, and Lele shortly behind her. Once Winter and Ariel joined them, the airship doors slammed shut and the vehicle blasted off towards the gate. I would like to inform you that Rory had decided to leave on her own, Lele told Winter. What? When? Lele shrugged. Winter growled, but it was too late to turn back. Besides, Rory was immortal. She could take care of herself. Pina gasped at the destruction around her. The city was in chaos, with collapsed buildings and fires everywhere. The sky was being swarmed by creatures of darkness, each terrifying in their own way. And the massive phoenix hovered over the city, easily larger than a flame dragon. If she weren't so shocked, Pina was sure that she would be cowering like Bozes was, shaking uncontrollably in fear. A rush of air brought her attention back to the airship. Standing at the open door, Ariel said, I will protect the ship from outside. If any of you can help, do so. With that, she stepped off the airship and flew at the Grimm, wings shining and blades slashing. The doors closed, allowing the interior of the craft to quieten down. Pina looked back outside, watching as an angel stood against the tide of darkness. Cracking magic surged as Lele began muttering words of magic. Lele, what are you doing? Winter demanded. I am assisting you in this battle, she calmly replied, still channeling her spell. Beside her, Tuca began to glow as she prepared magic of her own. Do not do anything rash. Your safety is of utmost concern, Winter warned. I do not plan to leave this vehicle, Lele informed her before releasing her magic. Around the airship, balls of magic began to form, like moons orbiting a planet. With a sweep of her hands, the balls fired off into the Grim, each exploding in a flare of light. A moment later, the sky unleashed its wrath. With the support of Tuka's elven magic, massive bolts of lightning cut through the sky, each strike ripping apart any Grim it touched. A hurricane began to form as well, the gale force winds pulling the airborne Grim, and the remains of the Atlesian air fleet, into it. And still, the Grim came. Pina watched as her companions and more nameless huntsmen and soldiers took down Grim after Grim. Yet, the tide of hungry creatures never stopped. Never had she seen an enemy like this, an enemy without number. She had thought that the Empire had the greatest, largest army in the world. Now she knew better. All of the Empire's forces could hardly hope to dent the numbers of this demonic army. The Grim must not be allowed into Falmart, or all would be lost. The Empire needed Remnant's aid, as much as it pained her to admit it. The airship shuddered, metal groaning. The roaring wind whipped up again as something sharp tore into the vehicle. Winter acted quickly, sealing up the tear with a burst of ice, but the damage had been done. With an engine destroyed, the airship entered an uncontrolled dive. "Hold on," Winter called out, stabbing her rapier into the floor. Black gravity glyphs appeared before the airship on quick succession, each slowing the vehicle down as it tore through them. Tuka helped as well, generating a powerful updraft that slowed the airship's descent. Their combined efforts turned the crash into a controlled descent, allowing the group to walk away unharmed. With a torrent of wind, Ariel landed beside them. At first glance, she was fine, but Pina could tell that even this apparently angelic warrior was tiring, her breaths quick, her actions slowing. "The gate is that way," she said, without apology or introduction. "We're trying to hold it for as long as we can." "Get there." "I will." A manticore, like Winter's previous summon, except much more inclined to harm them, dived down from above, its claws grabbing onto Tuka's shoulders. With a startled cry, she was brought into the air, rapidly getting out of reach. Winter and Ariel's eyes met for a moment before they nodded and the latter blasted into the air after Tuka. Taken by the surprise of the sudden event, Pina, Bozes, and Lele barely had time to react. Winter, however, was already planning out the next move. An alpha Beowulf summon formed beside her, larger than a man. "Let Ariel retrieve Tuka. We will head to the gate," Winter ordered, eyes narrowed. "You three, stay close to me, and slay all who dare oppose us." Lele's magic began to crackle between her fingers, her blue eyes glowing with power. Pina and Bozes, for the first time, unsheathed their blades in Remnant. Their fear was forgotten. Now, they had one objective, and they focused on it. Their hands were stable as they prepared to fight the Grim. "As for Rory, I believe that she's heading to the gate. Hopefully, we'll meet her there." Rory was, in fact, not heading to the gate, away from the Grim and towards safety. Instead, she was actively running towards the massive Grim Phoenix headed for the tall tower in the center of Beacon Academy. As she approached, the apostle drew back her arm and flung her halberd with all her impressive might, sending the deadly weapon scything through the air. It struck the Phoenix under its wing with explosive force, the sheer momentum of the halberd causing it to rip through the Grim's flaming feathers. It screeched as it fell, unbalanced, but the woman riding it didn't seem to care. She just leapt off her crashing mount, abandoning it as she floated into the top of the tower. Rory began to leap, each jump cracking the land beneath her and taking her up what seemed to be an impossible distance. Retrieving her halberd from the collapsing Phoenix as she did, she used the rubble around her as platforms to send herself up to the top of Beacon Tower. Rory reached the top very quickly, and, noticing the lack of an entrance, she slammed through the wall. In a shower of debris, the apostle entered the headmaster's office, dragging her halberd into the ground to halt her momentum. A child. The woman who had been riding the Grim Phoenix mocked. At this distance, basically in her face, Rory could see that the mysterious woman's skin was a deathly pallor, and she had glowing crimson eyes. Dark purple veins that line her face and arms, and she wore a very long, short-sleeved black robe that dragged across the ground. "Are you truly so desperate, Ozpin? Ms. Mercury, please." "Child." Rory scoffed, "I'm older than you." The bold declaration gave the woman pause as she examined Rory in closer detail. "I am Salem, girl," she introduced, "and perhaps you are more than a child." "Who are you?" "That's none of your concern, Salem." "Ms. Mercury, please Lee." Once more Rory ignored Ozpin. With an elegant bow, she too introduced herself. I am RWBY Mercury, Apostle of Emroy, the god of darkness, war, death, violence, and insanity. I am immortal. Truly, immortal, and a representative of a god. Yup. And you, are you the one they call immortal? RWBY asked. Ms. Mercury. Both others completely ignored Ozpin. I have been cursed with immortality. For a crime I did not commit. And you, how did you become an immortal? Chosen by Emroy. Enough. Ozpin thundered, Ms. Mercury, return to your world at once. I will handle Salem. With that, he lunged forward in a flash, his cane outstretched to attack. Even with his incredible speed, Salem was prepared, unleashing a volley of sharpened shadows at her foe. Without deviating from his path, Ozpin either dodged or swept the dark spikes aside, bringing himself close enough to Salem to unleash a flurry of blows. Knocked back, Salem raised her hands into the air. A swarm of Nevermores immediately descended upon Ozpin, forcing him to destroy them. Very quickly, they fell to his skill, but they did their task of stalling him. Will you join me, RWBY? Join your power with mine. Take revenge on the gods who have wronged us. Who forced their curse upon us, Salem asked RWBY. She laughed. Curse. The apostle mocked, this is no curse, fool. The honor of protecting not just my world, but all worlds, is mine. And you must be destroyed. Having said that, RWBY leapt forward, halberd swinging. Growling in anger, Salem summoned black spikes once more, impaling RWBY in midair. They pierced her body, holding her in place. Foolish child. Then I will take it from you. Salem stepped towards the trapped RWBY, an arm outstretched in preparation to leech her power. She then recoiled as a powerful wave of aura centering from RWBY exploded out, shattering the spikes. RWBY dropped to the ground, wounds already healing. She licked her dark purple lips. Raising her halberd, she prepared to attack, only for a green blur to beat her to it. Ozpin struck at his ancient enemy with both his cane and magic. The surprise assault sent Salem flying off the tower, although it could not kill her. For your own good, Ms. Mercury, leave, he advised. RWBY laughed at the recommendation, try to keep up, old man. She leapt off the tower, and Ozpin followed her over the edge. The grim phoenix met them on the way, screeching. Neither made any move to escape. RWBY slammed down onto its head with her full aura and god-enhanced might, her halberd ripping a massive wound and almost cleaving the grim into two. Behind her, Ozpin followed up with a blast of green energy straight into the wound, and the massive creature exploded in a blast of ash. Below, Salem awaited their arrival, unconcerned by the destruction of her great beast. As her enemies approached, the Grim Queen sent forth massive waves of dark magic, as well as more airborne grim. RWBY tore apart anything in her way, her weapon cutting through the chaos, completely unaffected by the evil magic. She landed on Salem, halberd first, only to have it blocked by her unnatural strength. Despite the force of the impact shattering the ground, Salem was unhurt, and she lashed out with a surge of lightning at RWBY. The attack was blocked by a translucent green bubble before Ozpin attacked with rapid stabs. Each had great elemental power behind it, enough to shatter concrete, but Salem was barely affected. RWBY too jumped in as well, both the ancient wizard and aura-boosted apostle unleashing waves of magical power that threatened to rend the battlefield apart. Not only did Salem simply shrug off the best that they could throw at her, but she also unleashed her own magical power. The night itself seemed to come to life, intent on suffocating the witch's enemies. Crushing waves of darkness poured onto Ozpin and RWBY, fueled by Salem's fury. Ozpin stopped the attack with a bubble of green light, holding the darkness at bay. However, his power had waned over the centuries, and Salem's strength overcame his. His barrier cracked, before shattering completely. Ozpin gasped as the shadows sharpened and pierced both him and RWBY. Leaving her ally, the apostle ignored her wounds and attacked Salem, halberd swinging wildly. Enhanced by her boundless aura, she darted around her foe, lashing out with rapid blows. Even with RWBY's incredible speed, Salem was able to dodge the initial strike, the halberd shattering the concrete floor. Undaunted, RWBY stuck, again and again, her centuries of experience and her deadly speed and strength raining heavy blows onto Salem. When RWBY came in for a sweeping blow, Salem grabbed onto the halberd's blade, ignoring the wound it caused her. Using her unnatural strength, She pulled the apostle to her using her own weapon and placed a palm onto her forehead. The dark veins on Salem's hand pulsed, and Rory tensed up, freezing as dark magic invaded her mind. She tried to fight it, but the millennia-old witch was more powerful than her. Rory mentally screamed for help as Salem forced herself into her memories. Lightning struck Salem from behind, disrupting her concentration. Leaving Rory to collapse at her feet, she turned to see Ozpin, kneeling on the ground. In his hand was his cane, still crackling with residual energy. He was also bleeding out from Salem's previous attack, on the verge of death. She stalked over. Cupping Ozpin's jaw in a black-veined hand, she looked into his eyes, still defiant, and whispered, "You lose." A moment later, the headmaster was incinerated into black ash that scattered into the winds, his cane dropping to the ground. Done with that, Salem turned back to face her other foe. Rory had not been idle during Ozpin's sacrifice. Her body thrummed with ancient power the likes of which Remnant had seen only thousands of years before. The power of a god. And when Rory spoke again, she spoke the words of another. She spoke the words of Emery. Enough. The figure standing against Salem in her endless tide of grim was still that of a young female child. But her voice, her very presence was much more. Behind the slightly crouching figure of Rory Mercury, with her halberd raised, was the shade of her god. Emroy, the god of death and war, stood with his chosen. He took the form of a man double her height, wielding a hammer of similar size. With the power of a god behind her, Rory spoke Emroy's words. "Salem, I sense your past. I know your punishment. Then you know that I was wronged." The Dark Queen screamed in return, unwanted memories of her past surfacing. "The gods refused to help me with such a simple request. They are at fault. They are to blame. Even now you deny. You have learned nothing from the past. Accept your punishment, Salem. The laws of death apply to all." The god of death demanded. "You're just like them," Salem spat. "You think you can do anything you want. Then die." Salem lashed out once more, telekinetically slamming the ground beside Rory into her. She exploded out from the rubble, unharmed, and resumed the attack. Once more, Salem was forced to block that halberd. But this time, Emroy was in the battle as well. His translucent avatar was spectral but very capable of causing physical damage. It slammed down onto Salem, smashing her into the ground. While she was stunned, both the god and his apostle unleashed a flurry of devastating blows, shattering the earth itself. When the dust cleared, Salem got to her feet. Her body had already regenerated, her immortality completely negating her opponent's attempts to destroy her. In return, Salem fired a blast of darkness from her hands, the beam consuming not just Rory but everything around her as well. It could kill anything, except for an immortal. Rory, and by extension Emroy, was sent flying back, but she was back on her feet soon after the beam ended. Both sides were immortal. Neither could realistically or truly achieve victory. But neither could lose, and so they went at each other with magic and might that shook the earth. "All huntsmen and civilians, evacuate immediately. We are being overrun. Evacuate immediately." Citizens and students alike shrieked in terror as they fled the creatures of Grimm that trampled through the grounds, the fear only serving to feed the crazed, destructive nature of the beasts. Fires burned on many of the booths, and sounds of havoc filled the air. Ruby barely heard the looping message as she stared out into the carnage. Distressing images of the last invasion of Vale filled her head, the horrors matching up with the scene in front of her. Last time, Blake had. "What do we do?" Blake asked. The other members of Team RWBY had gathered around their leader, readying their weapons. Ruby snapped out of the trance. Blake was here. "We stayed together," she decided. There were too many to fight. As much as she hated to admit it, Vale was lost. "Fall back to the gate. There'll be soldiers there, we can help them. And help whoever we can in the way." Her team nodded. Then they moved. Young led the way, punching and blasting the Grimm out of the way. Weiss and Blake followed after her, covering her back and shooting down any that got too close. Ruby covered the rear, scythe flashing, and also took some time to snipe priority targets. Together, Team RWBY blasted their way through the Grimm and the corrupted Atlesian Knights, picking up some stragglers along the way. They covered each other, watching for attacks that came from every angle. Now shepherding a group of civilians, Team RWBY soon came across a heated battle. With Coco, Neptune, Sun, and Flynn laying down cover against the airborne Grimm, Velvet was taking on a pair of Atlesian paladins at the same time, both far larger than she was. For the first time, her weapons capabilities were revealed as she danced across the bulky mechs. The hard light projection of Crescent Rose slashed across a paladin's armor before Velvet used Monhild to fire grenades to simultaneously knock it back and bring her into the other. Myrtanaster, Floating Array, Janduya, and a host of other weapons all made an appearance as Velvet systematically tore the two mechs apart. Until one unexpected broke through Gamble Shroud's ribbon, used to restrain it, and landed a blow on Velvet. It slammed her into the ground, causing a cry of pain. Without hesitation, the paladin lifted its leg up to crush her. "No!" Ruby cried, dashing forward in a burst of petals. She slammed into Velvet, propelling them both away from the paladin. It stomped on nothing more than the ground, before reaming its weapons. "Stay together!" Ruby called out, "Work together! No one dies today!" She stood protectively before the injured Velvet, Crescent Rose out and ready. The paladin threw a powerful punch at her, one that she could not block alone. Yet, Ruby refused to leave her friend's side, staring defiantly at the Rouge mech. Taking the blow might hurt her, but her friend would be safe. With Ruby and Velvet filling her vision, Weiss sent herself dashing forward. Refusing to let either of them, her leader and the Faunus, get hurt any further, she pushed herself, drawing upon a skill she has capable of but had never managed to use. The paladin's punch met not Crescent Rose but a large, glowing blade. The blade belonged to a severed arm, summoned forth from an unfamiliar glyph. The shock in everyone's eyes was reflected in Weiss' own. She gritted her teeth and swung her rapier. In mirror of her motion, the blade too swung forward, effortlessly pushing the paladin away. A moment later, it slashed down, cutting the mech cleanly into two. Then a four-legged mech dropped from the sky, slamming down onto Weiss' summon and shattering it into dust. Blake looked in horror as the familiar spider droid combined its four cannons, charging up its ultimate attack. No more running. Steeling herself, Blake ran directly at the deadly robot, instead of away from it. Throwing her new Gamble Shroud at the large, combined cannon, Blake waited for it to latch on before triggering her weapon's new function. Tiny rockets flared to life, designed to give her attacks more strength. Instead, they pulled the laser cannon aside, away from the others, and straight at a yellow figure. By the time Yang, finishing off a creep, noticed the giant cannon aimed at her, it was too late to dodge. She was utterly consumed by the blast of light, but when it ended, Yang still stood. Her hair blazing like the sun, she charged at the spider droid. With enough strength to destroy it, enough strength to protect those she cared for. Yang broke the color spectrum once more as she utterly obliterated the mech in a single punch. A fireball streaked over their heads, striking down a griffin. The group turned to face the source of the blast. Cinder Fall came running out of the smoke, one hand holding a briefcase and the other a small fireball. Behind her came her teammates, Emerald and Mercury. "Hey, Cinder, come with us, we're going to the gate," Ruby called out. Cinder smiled, blasting a Nevermore with a fireball. "We'll like that," she replied, running to Team RWBY's side. Ruby noticed that she was clutching her suitcase as if her life depended on it, but gave it no second thought. It was probably something important to her. Now with the three new additions, the group continued to the gate. The Grimm attacks seemed to slow, perhaps because they were closing in on the gate and their attention was drawn there. Whatever the reason, the group could recover just a little as they ran. There was a massive explosion nearby, the power of which shook the earth. With the roar unlike any living beings, fire and brimstone were sent into the air as in a volcanic eruption. In the center of this blast, visible for all to see, was a single human figure, with white skin and black veins that struck fear into all who gazed upon her. One particular piece fell, blazing, in front of Ruby and her group. It slammed into the ground with a burst of dust, causing them to come to a halt and look at the new crater cautiously. Something moved within. Rory grumbled as she rose out of the crater, patting out the residual flames. Before their eyes, her grievous wounds faded away. "Ow, that crazy woman is irritating," she muttered. "What the heck was that? Who is she?" Yang demanded. "A pain in the ass, that's what she is," Rory complained. "How am I supposed to kill her? She's as immortal as I am." "What? Emroy's projection reappeared behind Rory. "Return to Falmart, Rory. You cannot defeat this woman, and neither can I, in this form," he ordered in his booming voice, before fading away. "What was that?" Weiss demanded, her rapier pointed at the wisps of the evaporating figure. "That was Emroy, my chosen god. In my semblance," Rory replied with certainty, "conduit. The ability for others to speak and act through me. That's how Emroy could speak so clearly here, and take a physical presence, so far away from his shrine. Now, time to leave." The group ran for the gate, which was less than 100 meters away. When they reached it, the forces around it were still standing. With the combination of a large number of huntsmen and walls of dust and bullets, the Grimm was being held at bay. Panicked civilians were being ushered in, while a steady stream of ammo and supplies were being sent to Remnant from the Atlassian base on Falmart. "Go, go." A soldier ushered them through. Shortly before the call went out, "All forces, fall back. Fall back immediately." The remaining huntsmen and soldiers fell back as ordered, running to the safety of the gate. The Grimm were hot on their heels, eager to tear them apart. On the other side, the moment that the last man exited the gate, the gathered forces opened fire into it. With the gate acting as a bottleneck, they halted any Grimm that tried to enter. Exhausted, the students collapsed to the ground. Team RWBY. Pina and Bozes. Lele. Rory. Winter. Kiro. For now, they were safe. And there were many questions to be answered. Salem gazed over the destruction that her forces had caused. Beacon Academy was now in ruins. Ozpin was dead, though he would return eventually. The Atlassian forces and the huntsmen had been decimated. The dead and debris lay everywhere. All that for one unassuming stone gate. Walking up to it, Salem put her hands onto the structure. Power began to surge. Chapter 17, Trapped. The ashes stirred and began to pulse. Drawn by an unseen force, the ashes began to swirl, spinning themselves into a single form. As more and more of the black ash consolidated, a screeching cry split the air. The grim phoenix rose from the ground, taking to the skies once again. Beneath it, Salem walked up to the gate, uncontested. The Grimm bowed and stood aside for their queen. She could not push through. The gate acted as a bottleneck for her infinite numbers of lesser Grimm, and her greater forces were too large to pass through. Furthermore, for some reason, she herself could not enter. Perhaps Emroy had altered the gate. Perhaps it rejected her darkness. No matter. Placing her hands on the stone, Salem drew upon her ancient magic. Magic, combined with the eternal life of the God of Light's fountain and the God of Darkness, Grim Pool, seeped into the very structure as Salem sought to corrupt it for her own use. From her hands, black veins began to spread across the gate, slowly expanding in a network of lines. Something cracked. No. The gate began to crumble and shake, pieces of it falling apart. Rock fell, sending up bursts of dust. No. Salem pushed more magic into the rapidly deteriorating gate, forcing her tendrils to spread more quickly in an attempt to hold the gate together. The portal began to flicker. No. A pair of Burringles charged into the dying pathway between worlds, attempting to force it to remain whole. Salem growled as she tried to force it back open. The entire structure collapsed, the portal vanishing. The Burringles were cut into two. The rumble of collapsing stone was quickly drowned out by a roar of rage that struck fear into even the Grimm. No. Where is General Ironwood? Winter demanded. No one knows. He didn't make it over to this side of the gate, a soldier replied. He was on edge, as were most of those who had fled when Beacon fell. The Alnus base was in chaos, the influx of refugees, the gate needed to be constantly monitored, and now the general was Mia. As Winter was a specialist in the army as well as Ironwood's trusted advisor, many of the Atlassian soldiers had turned to her for leadership. As well as she could, Winter tried to bring the base in order. She sent soldiers to guard the gate, organize the refugees, resupply their weapons, menial tasks, anything to keep the forces focused. Like Winter herself, they had temporarily lost the ability to return home. For the sake of everyone in the base, the soldiers had to keep going, or despair would set in. Even now, Winter could feel the desperation beginning to build in the air. She also recalled all the Atlassian forces currently scattered around Falmart undergoing various missions. She would need all the manpower she could get. After hours of frantic activity, Winter finally sorted out the important issues in keeping the base running. Several warehouses of food had already been prepared, which could feed everyone for a while, even including the unexpected number of refugees. At least Alnus town nearby was always expanding, providing a good source of housing and jobs. Trade was flourishing there, guaranteeing a constant supply of food. Winter had been unsure when, weeks ago, she had recommended setting up that temporary settlement. Now, however, it had grown into a vibrant community, one that may be a key piece of survival for Alnus base. However, there was a critical problem. Dust. Cut off from their supply, the base had only a very limited supply of that valuable resource. With so much technology relying on dust, it became a top priority to find a new source of it. Seeing as how they were on a different planet, that seemed unlikely. As such, Winter had sent off a number of scouts to find an alternative energy source that their researchers and scientists could adapt their technology to. Now finally free, Winter barely managed to catch her breath before a messenger came to her. Team RWBY and Rory want to speak to you. Winter came to meet Team RWBY soon after the request. They met within sight of the gate, where there was currently an uneasy stalemate. Any Grimm that tried to enter was immediately torn apart. Any machine that tried to return was also torn apart. Uncle Kiro, you made it. RWBY cheered, dashing over to hug the elder man who had also come to see them. Hey, no Grimm invasion will stop me from making sure you don't get into trouble, he boasted. Where is everyone? Winter was the one to reply, your father was on a mission but on his way back now. The princess and her aide are safe and preparing to return to their capital. Lele is resting. Tuka. What happened to her? She was separated from us on our way here. Ariel went after her, but I've got no news from either of them. RWBY seemed to deflate at the news. We must get her back. No, we cannot risk going back, Winter shut her down. But, nearby, the gate shook, sending a rumbling shock through the ground. Dark veins seemed to spread through the stone before it began to crumble. Before their eyes, the gate cracked and crumbled, collapsing into a pile of dust. That settled that argument. Honestly, after the mysterious woman and the fall of Beacon, even the collapse of the gate didn't faze Winter. They had been unable to return due to the Grimm, anyway. Winter sighed and began to consider ways to reallocate her forces and find some other way to return. Maybe someone in the Empire could try to reopen it. Team RWBY seemed to freeze as the consequences of the gate's collapse began to sink in. Unfortunately, Winter had no time to let them think. Why did you ask for me? She tiredly asked, I'm going to be very busy. We want to know what happened. The place was chaos. Why did the robots attack us? Who was that woman? RWBY blurted out. And now what? Without the gate. Unfortunately, information about that attack is lacking. As for the Knights, there was a virus in our systems, but we've purged it and patched the vulnerability up. As for that woman that Rory fought, no one seems to know anything about her, or how she's controlling the Grimm, Winter sighed, and now with the gate destroyed, we can't even send scouts back through to find out. I know who she is, Kiro said. What I'm about to tell you is confidential, but at this point, I might as well just tell you. Her name is Salem. As Rory can attest, she is immortal. She can control the Grimm. Apart from that, though, not much is known about her. And her purpose. Why did she attack Beacon? Winter demanded. That's an even longer story. One that Ozpin wanted to keep secret. The headmaster. Where is he now? Kiro grimaced, holding out a cane. Dead. But he had a mission, one with its origins in legend. Not many people are super religious these days. Reattaching the staff to his side, Kiro pulled out his flask and took a sip. No one stopped him. This world's been around for a long time, long enough that people have created dozens of gods. But if you believe Ozpin, 2 of them are actually real. They were brothers, Kiro began. The older sibling, the god of light, found joy in creating forces of life. Meanwhile, the younger brother, the god of darkness, spent his time creating forces of destruction. As you can imagine, they both had pretty different ideas about how things should go. The older one would spend his days creating water, plants, wildlife. And at night, his brother would wake to see all the things that the elder had made and become disgusted. To counteract his brother's creations, the god of darkness brought drought, fire, famine, all he could do to rid Remnant of life. But life always returned. So one night, the younger brother went and made something that shared his innate desire to destroy anything and everything. Ruby's voice was quiet but rang with understanding. The creatures of Grimm. Kiro nodded. You guessed it. He continued the fable gradually. The older brother finally had enough. Knowing that their feud couldn't last like this forever, he proposed that they make one final creation, together, something that they could both be proud of, their masterpiece. The younger brother agreed. This last great creation would be given the power to both create and destroy. It would be given the gift of knowledge, so that it could learn about itself and the world around it. And most importantly, it would be given the power to choose, to have free will to take everything it had learned and decide which path to follow, the path of light or the path of darkness. A grin still tickled his lips whenever he heard the last part. And that is how humanity came to be. I have little time for fairy tales, Kiro, Winter interrupted, get to the point. What does this have to do with us? Well, Kiro replied soberly, that's the kicker. See, the four gifts to mankind, knowledge, creation, destruction, and choice, aren't just metaphorical. Each of them exists in a physical form, left behind by the gods before they abandoned Remnant, and each of them is extraordinarily powerful. If someone were to collect all four, they'd be able to change the world. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. The Huntsman Academies were created to train generations of humanity's protectors, but they also serve another purpose, guarding the relics. When Ozpin's predecessor founded the schools, he built them around the relics to act as a fortress. Not only would they be easier to defend, but they would constantly be surrounded by trained warriors. The hope was that hiding them would keep mankind from using them against itself, and, of course, keeping them out of her reach. Salem wants the relics. We don't know why, but if she gets them, it's not going to end well. He paused for a long moment, letting them absorb the information. And do you have any proof of this? Winter asked. Kiro looked at her incredulously. Did you not see Salem just walk into Beacon with an army of Grimm behind her, throwing magic left and right? What more proof do you want? Why tell us this now? Ozpin wanted this to be kept secret, but for the first time in a long time, Salem has personally come out. To look at the gate, no less. She usually works in the shadows, subtly manipulating things, but she just launched a full-scale invasion. Whatever this gate is, in this world, she is interested. And that, well, that's not good. I am Specialist Winter Schnee. Until the gate is reopened or we can find another way to communicate with Remnant, we are cut off. As the highest-ranking officer of the Atlesian army, I am taking full command of all operations on Falmart. Her position now made official to the entire base, Winter called Kiro and the top-ranking members of the Atlesian army into a meeting. There, to incredulous and begrudgingly accepting looks, they explained what they knew of the situation to the high-ranking Atlesian officers. The gate's collapse for unknown reasons, Salem and the relics. All the information that Ozpin worked so hard to keep secret, Kiro told them all. Was it the right choice? With Salem already coming in force, it was only a matter of time before they figured things out anyway. As professional soldiers, they took in the information relatively quickly and immediately began making plans, both to return to Remnant and to acquire the relics. The problem was that no one had any idea of how the gate worked in the first place. Despite great effort to study it, information on the mysterious structure was scarce. And without a way home, the second objective was impossible. Some time into the planning, Rory burst into the meeting room, startling all within. Why are you here, Rory? Winter asked. We're busy at the moment. With so much to be done, she more pressing issues than a single person, even immortal, and her icy tone reflected it. The disapproving looks of her advisors were similar. Rory pouted a little at the cold reception, so I guess you don't want to know who can reopen the gate. Suddenly, all the high-ranking members of the Atlesian army were very receptive to hearing from her. Do tell us. Hardy, the goddess of the underworld, was the one who opened the gate. She can make another, Rory confidently said. A goddess? Why would she even open it in the first place? Rory shrugged. Who knows? Bored, probably. Your armies invaded our home because a goddess got bored. A captain exclaimed. Not my army, Rory hissed. The captain gulped and remained quiet. Then, Rory drew back and shrugged, but yes. Where does she reside, Rory? We must prepare a team to reach her immediately. Nope, she denied, smiling. A wicked look in her eyes, she said, I have a few conditions. The officers looked worryingly at each other. What are they? One asked cautiously. Rory grinned. I will lead a team to Hardy's shrine to ask her to reopen the gate for you. But, I want Team RWBY with me. Your boss put some ban on them from meeting me, right? Seeing as how you're in charge now, that nonsense ends. With them all now trapped on Falmart, that ban was pretty much already void anyway. That can be done, Winter replied, but only if they agree to go. Rory shrugged. Sure. Oh, and no soldiers. I don't want some stupid military guys telling to what to do. The Atlasanes took offense at that but wisely decided not to speak up. Fine, but I will send someone I trust. Still, any reason why you specifically want RWBY? They're still young, and not the most responsible. They're fun, Rory replied, grinning, unlike all these boring soldiers. Also, I want a gun. Not one of the useless ones your guys use. I want one, a big one. Explodey one. A gun. The captain did not even try to contain his incredulity. Why would you even need a gun? You're immortal. Because they look fun to play with. So, deal. The Atlesian commanders came to the conclusion that, with her already extensive combat abilities, giving Rory a gun, even a rocket launcher, wouldn't really affect much. So, they agreed. Great. Tell me when you get some guys ready, and I'll bring them to Hardy, Rory concluded happily. Bye. Please wait, Ms. Mercury. I heard your god helped during the battle. Winter asked. Ah, yes. Emroy decided to check out what was going on. Why? Rory asked. Can you describe exactly what happened? Winter questioned, perhaps it will help us understand the situation. Sure. But, you owe me a favor, Rory said. The army leaders looked apprehensively at one another. Owing someone like Rory a favor was never a good idea, but the information was very valuable. Deal, Winter agreed. I felt the power coming from the woman. Salem. I felt that she was somehow wrong, as though her presence was corrupting the land. So I attacked her with your headmaster Ozpin, but you know, she's immortal. And has some crazy powerful magic. Rory frowned as she recalled what happened next. Salem overpowered us. She tried to do something to me, like clawing through my memories, and Emroy did not take kindly to that. Then my semblance was unlocked and I allowed him to take almost a physical presence here, to fight with me. Oh, and Ozzy died. Emroy seemed to know how Salem became immortal, but before you ask, he didn't tell me. Salem was pissed when he tried to talk to her, and then we fought. It was epic, but a draw. The end. There was silence as the information was processed, then Winter spoke. Thank you for the information, Rory. Is there anything else? Nope. Then would you please leave the room for a moment? I would like to discuss this issue, and your offer. Rory shrugged and left. Sometime later, they called her back. All right, I've discussed this issue with the officers, and we have come up with a proposal. Along with Team RWBY, Taiyang Xiaolong, the princess, her aide, and my diplomat, you will first travel to the capital of the empire. There, find Dr. Bartholomew Oobleck and Miss Vila Fogzine. I presume you still remember them. That doctor is on drugs. I will not comment on that, Winter decided. Find them. Give them this message, she said, holding up a scroll. They will escort you to Hardy's shrine. Ah, don't you trust me? No offense, but no. Furthermore, Team RWBY needs supervision. As you know, they're not always the most sensible, Winter explained. Ah, you're no fun. Fine, I'll find the babysitters. When do we leave? Rory asked. First thing tomorrow morning. Get some rest, prepare whatever you need. A vehicle and supplies will be provided. In a quiet room, Cinder put down her suitcase and opened it up. Beside her, Emerald and Mercury could not help but recoil as a tentacled, jellyfish-like seer grim floated out. As Cinder gave a bow, Salem's face appeared on the bulbous head of the seer. Well done. Chapter 18. Forward. This is stupid. Yang cursed, pacing restlessly in Team RWBY's new room. The room was small, as expected when a recently founded town suddenly had to deal with a massive influx of refugees. If not for Winter's influence, they doubted that they would even get a room to themselves. You're not helping, Yang, Weiss commented. I know. That's the problem. Said girl complained, the freaking gate up and died. We haven't heard from JNPR, or anyone really. And we're sitting here waiting. I want to be doing something to help. Weiss mentioned, well, we are technically still banned from. Weiss, we are literally stuck here now. And Ironwood is missing, and your sister is in charge. I don't think anyone cares about that ban anymore, Blake Riley commented. So let's get out there and see what we can do. Like what, Yang? Weiss rebuked, the gate is, as far as we know, magic. Have you suddenly discovered that you're a magician? If not, then there's pretty much nothing we can do. Stop being so pessimistic, Ice Queen. Do you even want to go home? Yang grumbled, even as she realized that she had no idea where to even begin. Weiss narrowed her eyes, yes. I do. But mindlessly running around isn't going to help. Neither is arguing among ourselves, RWBY cut in. I know we're all affected by this, but I'm sure we can come up with something. Like what? I'm being realistic. It's not like my sister is going to call and offer up a solution. RWBY's scroll rang. She accepted the call and Winter's image popped up on the screen. Team RWBY, the new leader of Alnus Base began. As you know, the gate has collapsed. Rory Mercury has provided a possible solution, but she wants your help. So, I'm asking you four to accompany her to find Hardy, goddess of the underworld, and convince her to reopen the gate. Wait, Rory has a plan to reopen the gate. We're in, of course. RWBY eagerly replied, looking at her team. They nodded in agreement. But why us? Rory seems to have developed a liking to you four, Winter sighed, unfortunately. The punishment that General Ironwood and Headmaster Ozpin will be lifted. Your father, Taiyang Xiaolong, will be accompanying you. I'll send you the full details later, but for now, thank you for your help. The screen shut off, and Team RWBY turned back to one another. Told ya, Ice Queen. Your sister is awesome. This is a good opportunity, Weiss admitted. RWBY gasped as Winter's message sank in, Dad's coming with us. Yeah, I wonder how he's doing. The Empire had been busy in the time that Pina was on Remnant. Under orders from Emperor Molt to prepare for a full war with the Men in White, the army was busy. The Empire was both strengthening its own forces through a mandatory draft while attempting to weaken their enemies via the Scorched Earth strategy. Almost every village near Alnus Hill had been razed to the ground, their lands scorched and their wells poisoned. This did not go unnoticed. The Atlesian soldiers refused to stand idly by and watch as entire villages were destroyed. After getting permission from the higher-ups, the soldiers formed squads to assist the victims of these attacks. With drones in the sky, the Atlesian army knew immediately if any groups of Empire soldiers tried to make a move. When they did, a group of soldiers, accompanied by Atlesian knights, would take a bullhead and rush over. Often, with the speed of the airship, the Atlesians would reach the village first and lay in wait for the Empire soldiers to arrive. When they did arrive, torches burning and swords gleaming, the Atlesians went to meet them. Their superior weaponry, tactics, and knowledge made every such clash a one-sided slaughter. Unfortunately, they could not always make it on time. Perhaps there was no available pilot, or the Empire's soldiers were exceptionally enthusiastic. Whatever the reason, the strike force would sometimes come to a charred, desolate scene. Jumping out of the airship at one of these scenes, Taiyang surveyed the area. Fires still flickered, the destruction recent. From under a collapsed house, a flicker of movement caught his eye. While the soldiers focused on securing the perimeter, Tai ran to help the survivor. He found a woman, her leg trapped under a collapsed wall, who froze as soon as she noticed him. I'm here to help, Tai reassured, grabbing into the stone wall. It was still in one large piece, landing over the woman's leg and trapping her in place. Finding a firm grip on the rubble, Tai grunted and pulled, his aura-enhanced strength allowing him to lift the debris and toss it aside. Tai then reached for the astonished survivor, helping her up. Blood was covering her, and her leg was almost certainly broken. Carefully bringing her somewhere safer, Tai called for a medic, who responded quickly. Looking back around the village, Tai noted that the soldiers were now scattered around the village, thoroughly checking for survivors. Leaving just a pair on guard duty, the soldiers efficiently combed the ruins of the village. Unexpectedly, Tai's scroll began to ring. It was from Winter, which only added to his curiosity. She was supposed to be back on Remnant. Winter, is anything up? Winter got straight to the point. Taiyang Xiaolong, the gate has collapsed. You are required to return to Alnis base immediately and prepare for a mission to reopen it. What? The gate has collapsed. We are trapped on Falmart for the foreseeable future. RWBY has given us a possibility to reopen the gate. You are to undertake this mission. Return to Alnis base immediately for mission briefing and preparation. As ordered, Tai quickly returned to Alnis base, where soldiers immediately escorted him to Winter's office. The first thing that he noticed was that Ironwood, whom he had expected to be in charge, was not present. "Where's the general?" he asked. "Unfortunately, General Ironwood is missing. As the highest-ranking officer, I have taken command," Winter explained. "As you know by now, the gate has collapsed due to unknown reasons, stranding us here, in Falmart." "Yeah, so, what do you need?" "RWBY Mercury has proposed a solution to our problem. She believes that the goddess Hardy can reopen the gate for us. Your task is to bring her, Team RWBY, my diplomat." "Wait, Team RWBY. That is a very bad idea," Tai protested. Winter sighed. "I know. But RWBY refuses to help us otherwise, and they have already agreed. That's why I need you to keep an eye on them." "But they, Taiyang Xiaolong, this is our best chance to return to our home. I understand that you are worried for their safety, which is why I am allowing you to join them. The mission will go on with or without you," Winter sternly said. "Fine. But weren't they banned or something?" Winter raised an eyebrow. "Their punishment is literally irrelevant right now. Anyway, this is the plan. You, RWBY, RWBY, Pina, Boses and my diplomat will." "Yeah, who is this diplomat exactly?" Tai cut in. "His name is Sedge Plain. James brought him over a few days ago. He's an excellent negotiator, if a bit soft. He'll talk to the Emperor and try to figure something out. However, he is not very good in a fight, so I need you to escort him to the capital." "Wasn't I supposed to go to Hardy's shrine? Last I checked, it's not in the capital." "No, it's not. But the capital is not too far off course, and I need you to meet up with Dr. Ublek and Ms. Fogzine there so that they can accompany you. I'll draft up a letter to inform them about their new task." "Bart and Fogzine, why are they still in the capital?" "Honesty, I'm not sure either," Winter admitted. "They were recovering our people, but by their reports, they've found everyone. Whatever they're doing in the capital, they haven't reported it yet. So I just give them your orders and they'll come along. While they are on Falmart, they are under Atlesian authority. Yes, they will. After that, take Ublek and Fogzine and go straight to Hardy's shrine. Once you get there, do whatever it takes to get her to reopen this gate. Whatever it takes, Taiyang. This plan is our best bet, and I'm sure you know how important it is to get a path back to Remnant. Bribe her, threaten her or seduce her, just get it done." Tai was silent. "You must understand, Tai. We are cut off and everyone is on edge. This mission has maximum priority. We're low in resources, but take whatever you need. You set out tomorrow morning." Dismissed. In a separate room, within Alnis base itself instead of the nearby Alnis town, Pina was trying to come up with a plan. Unfortunately, the behavior of her aide, Boses, was worrying. "Are you okay, Boses?" Pina asked. "No," she cried out, more than a little panicked. "What the heck happened?" "The Grim." Boses shuddered at their very name, demons. "And they were everywhere. We cannot go back there. Going through the gate was a mistake." Pina had to admit that the Grim did seem a lot like demons. Now that the adrenaline from the escape had worn off, both the girls were feeling the shock. The Grim had been everywhere, inhuman screeches sounding out into the night. With Winter and her Beowulf in the lead, they had cut a path through the landbound Grim to escape through the gate. At that moment, with their survival at stake, their training had taken over, steadying their hands and blades to cut the Grim down. Every time Pina closed her eyes, she could see the devastation, the terrifying visage of the monsters looking at her. It would haunt her for weeks or months to come, but she would stand strong. For herself, and for the Empire, she could not let it defeat her. Unfortunately, Boses was not so focused. Still in their room, Pina's aide was walking circles around the area, alternating between freaking out over the Grim and raging at Remnant. When her path brought Boses in front of Pina, the princess reached out and gripped her shoulders firmly. Twisting Boses to face her, Pina looked at her aide in the eye and demanded, "Calm down. Calm down. We just went through the underworld. How can I calm down? Demons, magic, all kinds of. Bozes sobbed, dropping to her knees. Her hands clutched her head tightly, and she shook her head violently as though to try to forget. Look at me, Pina commanded. Something in her tone, her stance, managed to cut through her friend's stance. When Bozes' vacant eyes locked into hers once more, Pina spoke in a solemn tone, Bozes Company Palesti. You are a member of the Rose Order of Knights of the Empire. Focus. Bozes' eyes sharpened. Bozes, you have been my friend for as long as I can remember. We have been through the underworld together. We have slain demons. Now I ask, will you stand with me? Will you be my defender, my guardian, my friend? Noble Knight Bozes Company Palesti, will you be my blade? To be a blade was to be the right hand of a knight commander. It meant power and responsibility and commanded respect from any knight and soldier. It was an honor rarely given. Her training gave Bozes the sense of calm that she needed at that moment. Evenly and humbly, she replied, Princess Pina Company Lotta. I accept your offer. I will be your blade. I vow to serve you to the best of my ability and to protect your life as I would my own. Then our lives are bound from this moment forth. Rise, Bozes Company Palesti, my blade. And so the deed was done. Despite the lack of ceremony, the promotion was official and binding. Pina now had a loyal ally, who would be both a skilled asset and a lifelong friend. Bozes would have a focus, to surpass her fears and to become an unmatchable knight. Bozes stood up, confident. Her skin seemed to shimmer, almost like metal. No longer did she fear the terrors of the past. Whatever she would face, it would be met head-on, with Pina by her side. The princess gave a small laugh. Well, Gray would have a stroke at that mess of a ceremony. How are you feeling, Bozes? I'm good, princess. What now? Now, we must decide the Empire's next move. How can we take advantage of this? The Atlesians have been cut off. Should we try to learn from them, using their weakness to pressure them? Or should we simply gather our armies and march on Alnus, reclaim it and destroy them all? The Manticore deposited Tuka in front of Salem herself, at the top of what used to be Beacon Tower. She crashed onto the ground as the Grim dropped her before flying off. Getting to her feet, Tuka looked at the pale woman before her. Hello, she greeted. It seemed like the only thing to say. Salem smiled. Greetings, elf. I have heard much about you. I'm Tuka. My name is Salem. Please excuse me for a moment, she replied, stepping beside Tuka. She turned to look just as Ariel blasted up in a blaze of light. Without a second of hesitation, Salem raised an arm, sending a spike of shadow energy to impale Tuok's rescuer. Moving too fast to dodge, Ariel could only attempt to throw up a projected barrier between herself and the attack. The barrier glowed brightly, layers of aura upon one another. The spike hit it and promptly shattered the shield upon contact, before driving on, unaffected, to pierce through Ariel. Her eyes went wide, disbelieving, before her golden aura glow faded. She fell, the spike falling along with her, to crash gracelessly at the bottom of the tower. Tuka backed away in horror. What? She would have caused too much trouble, Salem said, dismissing the issue with a wave of her hand. And she was of no use to me. But you, Tuka, your spirit magic intrigues me. You killed her. Salem sighed. She was going to be a nuisance. Focus on me, Tuka. There is something I want from you. Tuka did not reply, so Salem continued talking. Your mind is troubled. You have lost someone close to you recently, someone you cared about, more so than that huntress who foolishly approached just now. Yes. Fire filled her mind, a suppressed scene from the past forcing itself to the forefront of Tuka's mind. The fire dragon, an unstoppable beast of pure destruction, stood over her village. Its shadow dominated the land, yet the village was lit, for it was afire. Arrows, wind, and water spirits filled the air as the elves tried their best to defend their homes and their lives, but the dragon swatted them away. Like insects. You must hide, her father shouted, throwing her into the well. The screams of the victims and the crackling of the hungry fire filled the air, but all Tuka saw and heard were her father, his desperate face looking into the well as she fell. Then a giant maw filled with too many teeth filled the sky. No, my father is alive, Tuka denied, hands clamping onto her head. He's. Salem smiled at the outburst. Yet he is missing. You have not seen him since then. But, I can bring him here, she offered, safe. You can spend your life with him. You can see your father again. All I want is your magic. For my father. My magic. Yes, child, Salem replied. Tell me about your magic, and I shall reunite your family. Father. I recommend you choose quickly, Tuka. My Grimm are getting restless, Salem warned. Around then, the Grimm growled to reinforce her point. You're Grimm, Tuka muttered and looked around. Her eyes seemed to focus. As an elf, she was more in tune with nature than most other species. The Grimm gave off a strange presence. Now that she realized it, Tuka also felt that same darkness from Salem. Unnatural creatures. Monsters. At that moment, Salem knew that she had made a mistake. As Tuka began consolidating her magic, Salem acted first. A pool of shadow formed beneath Tuka's feet, from which a swarm of Grimm-like shadow hands emerged. They grabbed onto the elf, holding her in place. What a shame, Tuka. I had not wanted to kill someone like you, Salem sighed, but it seems that I have no choice. Tuka struggled against her bindings as Salem strode closer, but could not break free. She released her magic, calling lightning down from the sky to strike Salem repeatedly. Her target, however, did not even attempt to stop her, simply ignoring the repeated bolts of electricity that struck her. In desperation, Tuka sent a sleep spell at Salem, hoping that it would buy time for her. Salem waved a hand, easily dispelling the magic. Stepping in front of her prisoner, Salem placed a hand on Tuka's forehead and began to draw out her magic. Tuka stiffened as Salem forced herself into her mind. Unfortunately for her, she had no goddess to protect her. She was helpless as the very life was drained out of her, and soon the process was complete. Salem's grim hands released Tuka's body, which fell flat onto the ground. Turning and walking away, the Grim Queen toyed with the new power swirling within her as she pondered her next move. The strange elven magic was different from her own, yet seemed so similar. Just like how, to her, Emroy's presence felt so familiar. She had to investigate this further, and to do so, Salem had to find a way to Falmart. The best way to do so was to open a new gate, from the other side. But her forces there were very limited. That was her first priority. A seer came floating along, and Salem stared into it. Well done, Cinder, I have new orders for you. And this at the end of part 6 of this What If. Hope you guys like it. Do not forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.